I've been wanting to do this for a while. We talk about old games here, we talk about some new games, but I wanted to go a little weirder today. On Game Ranks and stuff, we've done plenty of videos about canceled games, but there's a couple of canceled games that have been floating around in my head for years. Weird ones that are often forgotten that I can't stop thinking about for some reason, right? Like, you probably have this too, where like some things just take up space in your brain where there's no reason for them to be there. And paying attention and following video games for so long, I've seen just things come and go, specifically a lot in the early 2000s, Xbox to Xbox 360, PS3 era. So today, I'm not talking about canceled games like Scalebound or Prey or Star Wars 1313. No, I'm talking about weird canceled games from years ago that I still think about. This first one sets the tone for what I'm going for with the games I'm talking about here. Demonic. This is the game from Grandma's Boy. I don't know if you guys remember that movie, but it was a stoner movie about a guy who developed video games, and I think it's kind of funny still, actually. You know what? I'll admit it. But in the movie specifically, there was a game he was working on, and they would show him playing it, and they would show it on screen. And it was like this third-person action adventure type game where you played as this almost predator looking monster with like tendrils and muscles, and you were just kind of like killing people in rooms and stuff like that. And this was a game called Demonic. And it was interesting because like I had been a little obsessed game person back then, like with like a computer that barely worked, but tons of video game magazines. So I was already aware of this game. So to see it pop up in a weird, like, kind of B-movie, Adam Sandler movie where Adam Sandler's not even in it, was wild. This was being made by Majesco in 2005 for Xbox specifically, and this was actually like a Clive Barker thing at first. Clive Barker, of course, known for his horror creations. This was supposed to be like a transmedium thing where it was going to be like a game and maybe a movie. And then eventually Clive Barker dropped out. They had used it and licensed it, I guess, for Grandma's Boy, which Grandma's Boy was in 2006, so it came out in 2006. Maybe you didn't see it until 2007, but that was really it. That was the last we had ever seen of Demonic, and for a lot of people, that was the first time they even saw it. It seemed like it would have been cool, just another game where you run around as a monster, killing dudes. For like as pretty simple and generic that the game kind of looked, though, it did have some cool art floating around. I guess that's because of Clive Barker, but that is just one of many that kind of fizzled out and totally disappeared, and we're never gonna see it again. This next one is a weird one. This is a deep cut, and it actually took a little bit of Googling to actually find the name of it and really remember what it was. This is a game called Possession. Now, there is a current game called Possession. I'm not talking about that one. This was a game that was, pretty much never really a thing, but it was a prototype and it was shown off. And as soon as I saw it, it stuck in my head forever because this was featured somewhere and I can't find any evidence of it. Like there's like little clips of it on IGN and stuff like that, but I swear I saw it in like a documentary or TV or some sort of event type of thing where they showed this game off and they were talking it up as kind of like the future of video game technology and graphics, like with how many characters were going to be on screen. This was like when the 360 and PS3 were rolling out, so the future was bright. Everything was exciting. The games coming out looked very shiny and interesting, and Possession definitely looked like that. What it was essentially this game where like you're a guy and there's a zombie outbreak, and for some reason you get infected, but you retain your intelligence kind of. So if you're thinking Stubbs the zombie, yes, I know, but this is kind of like the badass edgy teenager version where you just turn into like this awesome bro zombie, and because you have some intelligence, you're able to command the other zombies. So it's got kind of like an RTS hybrid style, which is what they were apparently focusing on, where you were able to direct your zombies to go, eat people throughout a city and really like take it over. It kind of had like a prototype vibe where there was going to be like this evil corporation involved and like you were getting revenge. Basically, it was kind of like Overlord, but with zombies instead of little minions. And the logo was like this cool red handprint, and the whole thing just stuck with me for a long time. And I kept going, oh yeah, whatever happened to that game? And never saw the light of day. It really didn't get very far after doing some digging. This was actually developed by Volatile Games. This is the people behind the Reservoir Dogs game. I think the Reservoir Dogs game dropped in like 2006. That was a big bet. That was a pretty big gamble. But that studio had actually been set up to make stuff like that. They were like a little branch of a larger studio that didn't want to just only make edgy, gory games. It was like Blitz or something like that. So Volatile Games was on Reservoir Dogs and this Possession game, but the Possession game was really just a tech demo and shopped around, and it never really got anywhere. But because I saw a glimpse of it somewhere back in the day, wherever it was, a magazine, a TV thing, I don't know, it felt like it was going to be a bigger deal to me, whereas it was just kind of like a half-cooked idea. So that's how this stuff goes sometimes. When you do look up and you find the actual entry for possession, it's listed as vaporware, and I think that's a pretty apt description. Also, the gameplay footage I have here, I don't know what happened. Like, I remember seeing it and thinking it was looking pretty cool and very like next gen, but like it looks like shit. Like, no offense to them. They probably don't care. They probably don't even remember working on this. But yeah, I don't know. It's funny that they also did the Reservoir Dogs game, which there's a pretty interesting story behind how that was made. But that I actually liked as a younger person. Now, sticking with the movie game thing, this one seemed like a really big deal because I remember at the time video game magazines making it out to seem like it was like the second coming of Christ, and that was a Dirty Harry game. They were pretty in the works for a Dirty Harry game, and it seemed like a big deal. It was announced in 2006. It was going to be a Warner Brothers published thing, and it was going to be developed by The Collective. The Collective, for those of you that don't know, were pretty big at the time. I mean, they were coming off of the Revenge of the Sith console game, which is really underrated as a Star Wars game, and also Mark Echo's Getting Up, like that game where you were like the parkour guy in like the kind of city and you do graffiti and stuff. I only rented it and played it for a little bit, but that was cool. So this was a big deal. Like, all they really did was put out a pre-rendered CGI trailer of like video game Clint Eastwood doing the go ahead, make my day scene. And that was it. That's all we really saw. And it even like got revealed again at like an E3 thing, and Lawrence Fishburne and Gene Hackman were going to be in the game. And of course, Clint Eastwood himself was completely involved. He put out a statement saying he was excited to actually keep doing Dirty Harry stuff, but in a different medium, and like, you know, expose younger people to the original film through this, which is crazy. I think that they even got Clint Eastwood on board. Like, that's wild. But crazier things have happened. I mean, they like kind of got Marlon Brando on board for a little bit for the Godfather game before he passed away. I would love to make a whole video about that game at some point. I know I've been talking about it for a while, but man, some of the ideas for the Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry game actually sounded kind of cool. It was going to maybe be like an open world San Francisco, which like San Francisco, I'm not really like a West Coast guy, but like just from playing Driver San Francisco and Watch Dogs, like it's a pretty good city for open world video game shenanigans. And they were going for like a crime thing where it was like you are Harry Callahan, and that whole thing with how he's like the edgy cop, and they were going to apparently work in gameplay elements of you dealing with crooked cops, kind of gray area criminals, and there was going to be like a kind of a walking the line type of thing, how far you'd want to go, how much of a badass gunning people down would you want to be, or how empathetic you would want to be, and that would tie into things. And sounded like a pretty cool concept, but we never really saw anything of it. There were like 5 Dirty Harry movies, so like there was a lot to pull from, and they really could have kept it going. They could have had their own little universe thing like that. I think that would have been pretty cool. Although personally, in terms of like if we're talking about Clint Eastwood stuff, I actually think The Gauntlet would have made a pretty cool movie. It's not like the biggest like or most famous Clint Eastwood movie by any means, but I thought that would be a cool concept for a game. Look it up. Anyway, yeah, Dirty Harry could have been a cool game. I mean, the fact that they got a Reservoir Dogs game out the door, which seems like a type of movie that would never make a good game, they did that, and then Warner Brothers kind of flopped with Dirty Harry. It sucks. It seems like what happened was that a bunch of rounds of layoffs happened, and by 2007 there was a round of layoffs, and then that was really the end of the project. Hey, next up, this episode is sponsored by the new Red Magic 8 Pro. It's a smartphone for gaming. If you game on Android and you're looking for powerful features, look no further. It features the fastest Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chip, an FHD and AMOLED screen for blazing fast 120 Hz refresh rate, and powerful haptics and dual stereo speakers. This phone features tons of optimizations and tricks for gaming, performance, and efficiency, with a secondary Red Core 2 chip to handle certain gaming functions like audio and haptics and lighting to let the Snapdragon focus on the raw performance. It also features the ICE 11 cooling system, something I've never experienced in a phone before. There's a lot to it, but the gist is that this bad boy has fans, like a gaming PC. It also has dedicated triggers on top, and it's good to hold, so it really gives you an edge. From regular smartphone features you expect to gaming customization, honestly, there are tons of awesome features, too many to list here, so you should check this out for yourself. Click the link in the description down below to check it out and definitely up your smartphone game. And once again, big thanks to the Red Magic 8 Pro for sponsoring this video. This next one is a really good example of like how much studios can build something up and talk about a very early in the works project that has a lot of money and people behind it, and how much the word can get out through YouTube and magazines and stuff like that, but it can still lead to nothing. It's called Fear and Respect. This is that Snoop Dogg open world GTA clone game. No, I'm not talking about True Crime Streets of New York featuring Snoop Dogg. No, this was like a whole almost San Andreas style open world gang game where Snoop Dogg was the star, but it was going for a little bit more of a storytelling thing, specifically because the game was helmed and like totally backed by John Singleton. John Singleton, of course, is the director of Boys in the Hood, so there could be something here. He also did later on Four Brothers, which I thought was actually really cool, but this was an older one. It was announced in 2004. It was by Midway, so I mean, you know where that's going, but it was a big Game Informer cover reveal. I still have the Game Informer somewhere in storage. I should have taken it out for this video, but just a big bold cover with like a beautiful image of just Snoop Dogg and Fear and Respect. And it seemed like this new kind of storytelling, more serious, more grounded take on like the wacky antics and gangs and stuff you do in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. So that seemed pretty refreshing. There was eventually like kind of like a trailer, like a little bit of a teaser game trailer thing, and it looked like shit. It looked stupid. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like it just looked like generic. But that initial pitch and the way Game Informer described it, it seemed like it was gonna be pretty cool. Unfortunately, it's another one that kind of just became vapor. Like, I don't know anybody like who was involved in the project or anything like that, but it seems like it kind of just faded away. John Singleton then just a few years ago passed away, so that puts the kibosh on that. Anyway, thankfully though, Snoop Dogg didn't lose his shot at being in a video game. Snoop Dogg's actually been in a lot of games, man. Crow in Def Jam, and then he did voiceover for like Call of Duty like match announcements, True Crimes, and then a bunch of NFT bullshit. So I mean, like he's all over the place, man. Snoop Dogg cannot be stopped. Now the last one is a bit more mainstream, but it's still kind of ethereal, and we never got any resolution really for it. It's the fact that they were making a third Getaway game. Yes, in the early days of PlayStation 3, they were like, Sony was pretty strong out the gate of a new actual Getaway game. Yes, at the start of the PS3, like the hype cycle for that starting to drop, Sony was right at the forefront talking up a new Getaway game, the follow-up to Getaway 2, Black Monday. And like we got to kind of see stuff. We got a big tech demo back when the PS3 was being revealed, showing off the power of the graphics. And we got a whole, apparently real-time rendered version of Piccadilly Circus in London. And it looked really awesome. At the time, absolutely mind-blowing. And this was kind of like the early, and this, hype is a dangerous thing, but this was kind of like the early rumblings for like Getaway people getting excited about a new one. Like, holy shit, look at this. They're rendering London like this in these graphics. This is going to be insane. And then later on, there was another trailer that dropped that I guess didn't get a lot of attention because like I had forgotten about it, but there is a trailer floating around out there featuring like a pretty cool, realistic looking Amsterdam, like kind of reminding me of the Modern Warfare 2's Amsterdam. But yeah, it's like a pan through Amsterdam and then into a building with like a cool guy with a gun. And then it says Getaway 3. And that felt kind of weird because that just kind of came out of nowhere. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter because nothing really ever came of it. Like a screenwriter had said something in 2008 that they were working on it. But then there was word. I had seen some articles of Sony trying to shop around getting a Getaway movie done. That had been pretty much talks from the early days of the Getaway series. Maybe they got too wrapped up in that, or something fell to the wayside because Sony London or SCIE London had been working on it, and there is someone on record saying that a good amount of work was done for this game, but it just never came to fruition. We see glimpses of that Sony London crime stuff in PSVR stuff, believe it or not. Like, some of those people are still involved making games, like The Heist, Blood and Truth, just like first person kind of like London crime heist, Guy Ritchie inspired stuff. But I think that's it. I think that's kind of the nail in the coffin for the Getaway, at least for now. I loved the original Getaway. I thought it was so cool and such a refreshing diversion from the Grand Theft Auto craze at the time. It was a little bit more realistic. It was focused on storytelling and like a love of movies. It built a more realistic world with more realistic and kind of tedious shootouts. Like, it was a mess, but it was cool. And then Black Monday tried more storytelling stuff and did some things, but it was like a glitchy hot mess. Ultimately, I just think that series could have gone so far, honestly, especially because like Guy Ritchie isn't really making movies like that anymore. Even like you just don't see a lot of films like that anymore. So for the games to keep it going, that would have been really sweet. But unfortunately, doesn't seem like that's the case. You got to get a PlayStation VR and play one of those experiences. But those are some games I wanted to talk about today. Just games that have been sitting in the back of my brain for a while. Like when you're just sitting around and you're like, whatever happened to that like Snoop Dogg game, you know? Or like, whatever happened to that game? Remember that was like a real game in Grandma's Boy? So like that's what I tried to do here today. And I know you probably got some as well. Whether you're older than me or younger than me, maybe you saw a game or read about a game or caught a glimpse of something that just kind of buzzed around in the back of your brain and then you found out it just never came out. We always talk about how hype is a crazy thing and people get hyped up for games and then sometimes the games come out and they're not that great. But what about getting hyped up for something that just never releases? That happens just as much. And it's just as painful, if not more, because you get no resolution whatsoever. All the games I talked about today barely have any official statements of them being canceled. So let me know what you think in the comments. Like, this is a fun conversation, but really let me know if you got any similar games, because I'd love to do a part 2 on this. This is fun. So thanks for listening to me ramble about weird, old, not real video games. I appreciate it. If you get what I'm trying to do here, I'm just talking about stuff I love. Some new games, some old games, movies. Clicking the like button helps me. Thank you. But that's it. I'm Jake Baldino. See you guys next time. Pizza's on me. Subscribe because video games.